If your mind is just a brain, why do your decades-old trauma patterns feel permanent? Yet research shows your body completely reorganizes itself every few years. The problem isn't your past. It's the localization delusion, the belief that your consciousness is trapped inside 3 pounds of matter, inheriting all of its limitations. Research teams have documented how conscious observation appears to alter the behavior of particles separated by vast distances. Yet we continue operating from the assumption that consciousness is produced by neural tissue, somehow generating the enormous field of awareness you're experiencing right now. The moment you see it as a field, your reality stops being limited by the skull. The shift from the container model to the field model changes everything about resistance, time, and biological expression. What if the boundaries you experience aren't real barriers but temporary focus points? Let's examine the brain as container model and its inherited limitations. This framework suggests consciousness emerges from neural complexity, billions of neurons firing in patterns that somehow create the rich tapestry of subjective experience. According to this view, your thoughts, emotions, and awareness are confined within the skull, products of biochemical processes occurring in gray matter. This identification with matter creates the illusion of separation and vulnerability. When you believe consciousness is housed in the brain, you inherit what appear to be the limitations of that physical structure. You become what feels like a fragile biological system, dependent on proper nutrition, vulnerable to injury, aging according to certain patterns. Your identity becomes tied to memory patterns stored in neural networks, your potential seemingly constrained by what this particular brain can process. But matter identification runs deeper than intellectual belief. It shapes how you experience reality at the most fundamental level. When you identify as a separate material being, you experience life as a series of impacts. Circumstances happen to you. Other people affect you. The world becomes filled with threats and obstacles that your solid, vulnerable form must navigate carefully. Here's what physicists have discovered about matter itself. Even solid objects are composed mostly of empty space, atoms with vast distances between their nuclei and electrons, creating the appearance of solidity through rapid energetic vibration. That brain you've been identifying with isn't the dense permanent structure it appears to be. At the quantum level, it's a dynamic pattern of energy, constantly exchanging particles with the environment, completely replacing itself every few years while maintaining the illusion of being a fixed, separate thing. The atoms composing your neural tissue are mostly empty space, with subatomic particles moving so rapidly they create the impression of solidity. These particles themselves behave in ways that challenge our everyday intuitions about matter, sometimes appearing as particles, sometimes as waves of probability. When observed at quantum scales, the sharp boundary between brain and not brain becomes far less clear than our everyday experience suggests. This premise of material identity, whether accurate or not, generates resistance, anxiety, and the sense of being trapped in linear time. Resistance emerges because you believe you're a separate solid thing that reality happens to. When circumstances don't align with your preferences, there's friction between what you want and what appears to be occurring. This friction feels real because you're experiencing it from the position of being a discrete object in space. Anxiety follows naturally from this identification. If consciousness depends entirely on the brain, then you're completely dependent on this biological system. Damage to neural tissue threatens your very existence. Aging becomes a countdown. Death represents potential annihilation of everything you consider yourself to be. The The sense of being trapped in linear time also stems from material identification. Physical objects exist in sequential moments. Past shapes present through cause and effect. Future remains unknown and largely outside your control. When you identify as matter, you inherit this temporal experience. Past experiences become patterns that seem to determine current possibilities. Change appears to require time, effort, and favorable circumstances. Here's where emerging research in epigenetics becomes relevant. Cells respond to electromagnetic signals and chemical messengers that correlate with your emotional and mental states. Every cell in your body has receptors that respond to these signals. These signals carry information that appears to influence which genes get expressed and which remain dormant. When you identify deeply as vulnerable matter, your entire system may organize around that frequency. Cells may express genes associated with stress responses, inflammation, and defensive patterns. They age at predictable rates and respond to challenges in programmed ways. This isn't conscious direction. You're not deliberately instructing your cells. But research suggests that your deepest sense of identity creates a kind of baseline frequency, and your biology responds. The most powerful signal may not be what you consciously think about yourself. It could be what you fundamentally identify as beneath conscious awareness. Studies in psychoneuroimmunology and epigenetics show that gene expression shifts dramatically based on perception, emotional state, and even meditative practices. Identical genetic code can produce different outcomes depending on environmental and psychological factors. But the question remains, what identity frequency are you broadcasting most consistently? Now, what happens when we examine consciousness itself rather than assuming its location? When we examine consciousness directly, something extraordinary emerges. Rather than being an emergent property of neural complexity, consciousness may be far more fundamental, as basic to reality as space, time, and energy themselves. This recognition challenges everything we've been taught about the nature of mind and its relationship to physical processes. Consider the phenomenon of non-locality in quantum physics. When two particles become entangled, measuring one instantly correlates with changes in the other, regardless of the distance separating them. While this doesn't violate relativity, no usable information travels faster than light, it does suggest that something deeper than our everyday spatial intuitions governs quantum relationships. Physicists describe an underlying quantum field, a substrate that transcends ordinary spatial boundaries. Some researchers and philosophers propose that consciousness operates through similar non-local principles. When you become aware of something, where exactly is that awareness located? You might habitually feel it's behind your eyes, but when you look for awareness itself, can you find it anywhere specific? The brain may function more like an interface or transceiver, focusing and filtering a field of consciousness into individual perspective, rather than generating consciousness from scratch. Just as a radio doesn't create the music it plays, but translates electromagnetic waves into audible sound, the brain might not generate consciousness, but serve as an interface that shapes the field of awareness into localized experience. This is one interpretation among several. The mainstream neuroscience view holds that consciousness is produced by neural activity. The transmission model has its own challenges. It must explain why brain injuries alter consciousness, where individual personality comes from, and how anesthesia works. These are valid questions worth sitting with. But consider this analogy further. The music exists in the electromagnetic field whether or not any radio is tuned to receive it. If consciousness exists as a fundamental field, the brain shapes and filters this field, creating the impression of individual awareness without necessarily producing the awareness itself. We can observe something intriguing about the continuity of awareness across different states. During deep sleep, when neural activity decreases dramatically, something persists. You wake up knowing you slept, recognizing the passage of time, sometimes remembering dreams. What exactly is it that registers this passage? The answer isn't clear-cut, which itself is worth contemplating. In altered states, whether through meditation, breathwork, or near-death experiences, people consistently report expanded awareness that seems to transcend normal boundaries of individual identity. They describe consciousness that appears to extend beyond the body, connects with other minds, or accesses information unavailable through ordinary sensory channels. While these reports don't constitute scientific proof, their consistency across cultures and centuries suggests something worthy of investigation. The brain clearly shapes and constrains normal waking consciousness. Damage to specific brain regions impairs particular functions: language, memory, emotional regulation. But does this prove the brain produces consciousness, or that it filters and focuses a more fundamental awareness? Both interpretations fit the available evidence. Here's the shift in direct experience. Try right now to find the boundary of your awareness. Not your body's boundary, the boundary of awareness itself. Where does the awareness reading these words actually end? You can't find an edge to it because awareness isn't a thing with boundaries. It's the space in which all experience occurs. This recognition, whether you interpret it as literal truth or useful metaphor, fundamentally changes how you relate to experience. When you know yourself as field rather than just matter, the sense of solid separation begins dissolving. Not as belief, but as direct recognition of what consciousness actually feels like when examined closely. A daily life example. Think about a moment when you felt completely present, perhaps in nature, or deeply engaged in creative work. In those moments, where was the boundary between you and the experience? Most people describe a dissolution of that separation, not losing themselves, but discovering a more spacious identity. That's what we're pointing to here, not a special state, but a recognition available in any moment. The implications ripple outward from this recognition into time, biology, and how reality responds to you. Your biology doesn't just respond to nutrients and exercise, it reorganizes around identity itself. This may be the most overlooked variable in human transformation, not what you think about yourself, but what you identify as at the fundamental level beneath conscious thought. Consider the baseline electromagnetic field your body generates. The heart produces an electromagnetic field that extends several feet beyond the physical body. Research from institutions like the HeartMath Institute has measured how coherent emotional states create more ordered, harmonious field patterns, while stress and internal conflict create chaotic, fragmented patterns. Here's what becomes measurable. When emotions achieve coherence, when there's minimal internal resistance or fragmentation, this electromagnetic field becomes highly organized. Other people respond differently to your presence, though they may not consciously recognize why. You've likely experienced this yourself, walking into a room and immediately sensing someone's energy, or feeling drawn to certain people while instinctively avoiding others. This isn't metaphysical speculation. It's electromagnetic field interaction, as real as radio waves, though far more subtle and complex. When you identify as vulnerable matter, as a biological machine subject to genetic programming and environmental damage, your entire system receives that signal and may organize around limitation. Cells express stress-related genes, age according to expected patterns, and maintain patterns that support your material self-concept. But when consciousness recognizes its field nature, the signal changes. Cells may receive information about fluidity, regeneration, and expanded potential. They can begin expressing genes associated with vitality, coherence, and optimal function. This isn't wishful thinking. Emerging research in epigenetics suggests biological reorganization follows shifts in perception and identity. The mechanism isn't fully understood, but the correlations are becoming harder to ignore. Meditation practitioners show changes in telomere length and inflammatory markers. People who undergo profound identity shifts often report unexpected health improvements. The biology appears to be listening to something deeper than conscious intention. It's responding to the fundamental frequency of who you believe yourself to be. Synchronicities multiply when observer identity shifts from local to non-local. When you identify as a separate material being, synchronicities feel like fortunate coincidences, meaningful but ultimately random occurrences. But when you recognize yourself as part of a unified field, synchronicities reveal themselves differently. You're not separate from the intelligence orchestrating the intricate dance of circumstances, encounters, and opportunities. You're an expression of that intelligence, temporarily focused into individual perspective. When you recognize this, the artificial boundary between inner intention and outer manifestation becomes more permeable. The field may organize itself around coherent frequencies. When your identity achieves coherence through field recognition, reality appears to reorganize in response to that coherence. This happens naturally, not through forcing or technique, but through what some interpret as the responsiveness of reality to conscious observation. People describe this as flow, but that word doesn't capture what practitioners report experiencing. They describe reality from a different felt position, not as separate from the field of possibility, but as the field temporarily focusing itself into their particular perspective. Doors open. Resources appear. The right people arrive at unexpected moments. Is this literal physics or psychological shift creating confirmation bias? That's a question worth holding lightly. What matters more is the experiential transformation. Whether you interpret it mechanistically or metaphorically, the shift produces tangible results. Let me guide you into direct recognition of this field nature. Close your eyes if you're in a position where that's safe. If not, simply soften your gaze and let your attention turn inward. Recognize that you're aware right now. Don't think about awareness. Just notice that you're aware of these words, aware of your body, aware of sounds around you, aware of thoughts arising and dissolving. Now try to locate this awareness. Where exactly is it? You might habitually feel like awareness is in your head, behind your eyes. But if you look for it directly, can you actually find awareness anywhere specific? Search for the boundaries of awareness. Where does it begin and end? Notice that awareness itself isn't located in space. It's not an object you can point to or measure. This awareness that's been following these words, it's not inside the matter of your body. Here's the key recognition. Body appears in awareness, not awareness in body. The sensations you call my body are arising in the same field of awareness that includes sounds, thoughts, and everything else you're experiencing. The body is something you're aware of through sensation and concept, but awareness itself isn't contained by physical boundaries. Feel the energy of being alive right now. Not the concept of energy, but the actual felt sense of aliveness in your system. There's a vibration, a movement, a current animating this form. You can sense it if you become still enough. Notice that this aliveness isn't necessarily contained by your skin. The sensation you call my body is vibration. The sensation you call air on my skin is vibration. The sensation you call sounds around me is vibration. All of it, different frequencies creating the appearance of separation where there might be fundamental continuity. Feel the potential continuity between inner aliveness and environmental energy. At the level of direct experience, before thought labels and divides everything, there's energy moving, vibrating, expressing itself in infinite forms. And you are this, not you have this, but you are this. This recognition naturally shifts daily experience. When you know yourself as field rather than just matter, resistance dissolves because there's nothing ultimately solid there to resist. Time becomes more fluid because you're not confined solely to linear sequence. Biology reorganizes because cells may be receiving different identity signals. This isn't a state to maintain through effort or force. It's a depth of recognition you can return to whenever the surface of experience gets caught in drama and density. Each time you return to this recognition, it deepens, stabilizes, integrates more fully until it simply becomes your baseline experience of being alive. Field recognition dissolves the artificial struggle between consciousness and reality because it reveals they may never have been separate to begin with. You're not a separate thing trying to influence an external world. You're the field within which all experience arises. This isn't about adopting a belief system or practicing a technique. It's about sustained investigation into the nature of what you actually are beneath the layers of conditioning and identification. Some will interpret this materialistically, as brain states creating compelling illusions of unity. Others will interpret it as consciousness recognizing its true nature. Both interpretations can coexist. What matters is the direct recognition itself. Continue exploring this intersection of rigorous inquiry and direct experience. Keep asking the difficult questions. Sit with the paradoxes. Notice when you're identified as solid matter and gently return to the recognition of awareness itself. Let this recognition deepen through direct experience rather than conceptual understanding alone. Theory points the way, but only direct recognition transforms how you experience reality moment to moment. The field is already here, you're already it. The question is, how often will you remember?